West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théères, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est long, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
With me for an exclusive interview is Jonathan Greenblatt. He's the CEO and National Director of the Anti-Defamation League. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me, Brian.
You penned a letter to Fox News Media CEO Suzanne Scott on Friday saying Carlson's been race baiting for years and it's time for him to go. Have you heard back from Fox yet? What has Fox said back to you since Friday?
So we haven't heard anything yet, but I'll tell you why if we step back. This is so problematic. And as you pointed out, Tucker Carlson has a history of sanitizing stereotypes and of spreading this kind of poison. But what he did on Thursday night really was indeed, as you put it, a new low. The great replacement theory, as it's known, is this toxic idea that there are a cabal of Jews plotting to overrun the country with immigrants, Muslims, black people, etc., and commit what they call white genocide. It is literally, Brian, a staple of white supremacist and extremist ideology. And so when Tucker Carlson literally introduces it to his 4.5 million viewers, he's serving as a gateway to one of the most damaging and dangerous conspiracy theories out there. And when I say that, again, let me be clear, this has real consequences. From 2017, the Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville, where this phrase was invoked, remember, Jews will not replace us. And then Heather Heyer was mowed down and murdered. To the shooting at the Pittsburgh synagogue in 2018, where 11 worshipers were killed. To the shooting the following year in Christchurch, where 51 people were killed, Muslim worshipers. To the murders in El Paso, where 20 some odd Latino people were killed. Again and again and again. It is the replacement theory that's been invoked by these extremist murderers. So when Tucker Carlson invokes it on his show, when he dismisses it, right, it is so dangerous. And I think, as you pointed out, the question is really from Fox management to the Fox board to Fox shareholders. How can they countenance their network being used to mainstream the most violent and toxic ideas?
As you say, there is a long history of Carlson's racist comments. I was about to say racially charged, but there's no reason to beat around these bushes. No, let's put up a scroll of some examples from the past. Remember, his top writer resigned last year after secretly posting racist and sexist remarks in an online forum. So there's some other examples on screen here. I put these up to make the point that Fox has promoted him. They've elevated him. He's the biggest star on the channel, the highest rated host. So what do you actually expect Fox to do?
Well, look, Father Coughlin got great ratings in the 1930s with anti-Semitic and racist rants until he was taken down. right? And, people like Lou Dobbs on the Fox network or Glenn Beck before him got great ratings with their wild, racist, and ugly conspiracy theories. So what do we want Fox to do? I mean, first and foremost, Tucker has got to go. Again, I think it is a risk, not just to the corporation, it's a risk to our society to be promoting these anti-Semitic and racist myths that literally were used by people on January the 6th to try to not just interfere with the election, but to murder lawmakers. I mean, I think we've really crossed a new threshold when a major news network dismisses this or pretends like it isn't important. This has deadly significance. So number one, Tucker has got to go. And then I think secondly, Brian, Fox needs to look at their entire primetime lineup and finally ask themselves, does this work? Because at the end of the day, let's acknowledge Fox isn't alone in this. They have advertisers. They have affiliates. Right? There are cable companies who carry their signal. If Fox won't act, it may be time for the advertisers to act. It may be time for, again, the affiliates and the cable companies to act, to finally, once and for all, say that America is, simply put, no place for hate. Why is this even a debate anymore, Brian?
Tucker just says, I'm talking about voting rights. And then the Murdochs will say, we don't cancel people. They'll say, you're trying to engage in cancel culture. That's what I can actually hear them in my ears, because that's exactly what they would say.
Well, look, this is not cancel culture. Let me be unambiguous about it. There has always been room for fringe ideas in America. That's a function of our First Amendment, and I embrace that. The question is, does Fox should take these fringe ideas and put them where they belong, on the fringe, not place them in prime time where they serve as a gateway drug to tens of millions of Americans, right? To literally conscript them into this conspiracy theory of violent white supremacy. We can't afford to look away any longer, Brian. It's incumbent upon, again, from advertisers to the cable companies to the shareholders to say there is just too much risk in his racism, and he's got to go. Look,
my worry is always my elderly neighbor who is watching Fox morning, noon, and night, who's a great gentleman. But, you think about what millions of people are hearing without realizing that it comes from white nationalist, white supremacist texts, right? Because they're hearing their friends say it. Tucker is their friend. They trust him. They love him.
Right.
And that's where this is scary. That's where this is dangerous. But I'm at the point now where I think the Murdochs have given up on it. They think Tucker's in charge. Someone needs to remind the Murdochs, they pay Tucker. Tucker's their employee. They're allowed to sanction him. They're allowed to, give him some guidance. But it doesn't seem to ever happen. There's a lack of leadership that is emphasized by the fact that Lachlan Murdoch is basically living in Sydney, Australia now. What is that, 15 time zones away from Fox News headquarters in New York. So you were giving them the benefit of the doubt, saying, well, it's only Sunday, they haven't replied yet. But I think they've had plenty of time to reply to your letter if they were going to.
Well, look, there's a reason why people like Richard Spencer or David Duke, praise Tucker Carlson. Because indeed, he's taken their talking points and literally used his primetime platform to mainstream them for millions of Americans. So as you put it, there are questions, where are the Murdochs? Where's the rest of the board at Fox? Again, where are the shareholders, the institutional investors, right, who have large positions in the company, need to ask themselves, can they really continue to ignore this kind of intolerance? Anti-Semitism and racism has consequences. January 6th made this abundantly clear. The body count is high enough, Brian, that finally we've got to take a stand.
It is Tuesday, the 13th of April of 2021, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner the English Bulldog is our snoozing sous chef. And our daily special is Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays, a small scant dash, a mere pinch of hot smoked Hungarian paprika. Makes all the difference in the world. It always has, and it always will. Hey, so we unfortunately have another kid murdered by cops, and they're using this, I thought my Glock was really my taser defense again. This is as old as the Oscar Grant murder. Even older. But that's what I remembered when it was first brought up. And when they showed the body cam of the officer involved, and I gotta say, I don't want to say ambivalence, but one definition of ambivalence is sort of like torn. So we will say that I'm a bit torn in the midst of this. But regardless, in the officer's body cam itself, she is holding her Glock the whole time and then yelling taser. In the heat of the moment, I suppose it's possible to forget that you didn't holster your Glock and then pull out your taser. It's possible. In the fog of war. What is a bit concerning is that this 26-year veteran, highly trained, was not a beat cop. The 26-year veteran was a negotiator, of all things. So I don't know, was she on a ride-along that day? Hasn't been out on the street holding a gun for a long time? Is that possible? Regardless, the negotiator for their police department was not able to tell the difference between a Glock and a taser. And what was the first thing that came out of her holster was the Glock. Oh, I don't know. It's a black kid. They might hulk up. Is that how it is? Another little bit of, or tidbit of info about this particular suburb or town in which this kid was murdered. And it was like murder. And his girlfriend was sitting in the passenger seat, too. No thought about where that bullet might go. Anyway, well, the defense is, I thought it was a taser. I just thought I was going to torture the kid with 40,000 volts. And they'll counter and say, no, they're 50,000 now. They've been able to up those tasers. The X2 model is really cool. 50,000 volts of torturing power. They meant to torture the kid with electricity instead of shooting him dead. But, oops. I hate when that happens. So, I guess the police chief there said it was an accident. Well, why don't they say that the target that had his windows broken and some of those fires that are started out there that's just an accident also. No, I don't think so. They called in the guard. I did mention that just once, I wish the guard would be called in and mobilized to protect the people from the cops from rioting every time they get caught murdering somebody. Yeah, I guess we're going to have to put up with that now. And right about 10 miles from the George Floyd murder. And that was murder, homicide. We should be clear, though, that when a coroner uses the term homicide, it means that that person didn't necessarily die from an illegal way. It just meant that they died at the hands of another, and there was no other underlying cause that could have caused their demise. Underlying meaning that, instead of the kid getting shot in the chest, he had a heart attack. I'm sure that whoever is going to be defending the 26-year vet will say, the kid had a heart condition. He was on drugs. He was this. Excited delirium. The kid really died from excited delirium from being afraid that he was going to get tased. Yeah, you know how they can twist. Excuse me. But, defense attorneys are tasked with, giving the best possible defense, even if it's stupid, I guess. Anyway, we can just surmise how that will go about. We are dealing with issues right now. And the cop is due some due process. You can't just condemn them without going through our democratic representative democratic process. And part of that is that they get their day in court. Okay? That's how it works. We don't just drag them to the gallows. Okay? We don't do that. But some other administrative tasks that could be done. They did release the name of the officer involved. That's how we know that she's a 26-year veteran and was a negotiator for the police department. So the little tidbit of information about this town is that a former police chief from not very long ago, who held the position of police chief for decades and decades, was, if not an avowed KKK sympathizer, was part of the KKK itself. And the KKK was allowed to run roughshod through that area for decades. Now, we might say that, that was all in the past. Well, not that long ago, actually. There are still people alive and probably just getting grandkids that experienced that fellow's reign. So, a black kid gets pulled over, they say, for expired registration. Then they said, you can't be hanging an air freshener off your mirror. And then it was for an outstanding warrant that was mailed. The notice was mailed to the wrong address. And a 20-year-old kid, now you might say stupidly, pulled away from the cop. But the cop is not supposed to be judge, jury, and executioner. And certainly not judge, jury, and torturer. I meant to torture him with 40,000 to 50,000 volts instead. I'm sorry. No, there's no sorry about it. Well, that's the big story that's on my mind. Let alone, I don't know, Johnson & Johnson causing blood clots. Some people will say it's only 6. It's such a slow number. Well, I don't know. Let the CDC. It's not any kind of, I don't know. Some people are getting mad like it's some sort of plot. Yeah, the ones who are getting mad are the ones who were saying that Trump was the greatest medical doctor in all history. Look at what he's done. Yeah, look what he's done. Anyway, this kid Dante getting killed. Just don't call it systemic racism. They'll get very mad at you if you do. All right, what's on the rest of the menu? Well, at the top, Fox won't replace Tucker Carlson after his defense of the anti-Semitic Great Replacement theory, no matter what the ADL says to Fox. Yeah, no matter what. And old Tucker is just tripling down on it. Uh-huh. Okay. You want to fight that fight, you Nazi? Hey, we have some experience in fighting Nazis. Just you wait. On the rest of the menu, Ron DeSantis is mad he cannot lie about masks on YouTube anymore. Damn. After years of silence, Greg Abbott is suddenly very concerned about abuse of immigrants at a Texas ICE facility. And Stone Mountain Park cited racial tensions for denying a permit for the annual Confederate Dixie Swastika event. After the break, we move to the chef's table where foreign interference in Canada is hitting Cold War levels because of vulnerabilities during the pandemic, and a Rome judge ordered the arrest of a Vatican suspect in the London real estate extortion deal. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. homepage at netrootsradio.com. To the right of the page is the chat room link, and the chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. To the left of that chat room link, near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, off to the left, is the link to our Patreon page. And if you could become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, your generosity helps us fulfill our civic duty. Now, if you could afford an espresso-type coffee drink, and if you could afford to send those funds our way once a month, we are able to stretch those dollars beyond compare and pay our bills, fly under the radar, fulfill our said civic duty as the founders originally intended. Oh, so many years ago. Yes, 10 years of constant 24/7, 365 broadcasting radio here, and we've been resisting diligently because of your generosity, and we thank you for doing so. And we thank you in the future for doing so in the future. Thank you. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that and so much more. Thank you, Tom. I, of course, take care of me. And who am I? I am at Justice Putnam on Twitter. I'm just only Justice Putnam in real life. But on Twitter, I'm at Justice Putnam. And go ahead and follow me there because I post the show notes and links diary about 10 minutes before showtime and then get that posted up on Twitter and other social media platforms. Indeed. Follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West and pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, etc., etc., etc. Okay, so this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Oh, did I tell you it's Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays? Yes, I did. Is out of the Associated Press, but it's coming our way by way of the American Independent. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis attacked YouTube and its parent company Google yesterday, Monday, accusing the tech giant of censorship in his decision last week to remove from its platform video of a coronavirus discussion he organized where his panel criticized lockdowns and mask wearing as ineffective. DeSantis said YouTube's contention that video of the March 18 panel violates its ban on the posting of disinformation is an attempt to stifle dissent against the federal government's pandemic response. That discussion included that quack Dr. Scott Atlas, a radiologist who was a coronavirus advisor to Donald Trump, and other physicians who support DeSantis' decision to open Florida's economy with few restrictions. Monday's attack is part of a bigger war DeSantis and other Republicans are waging against social media giants, including Facebook and Twitter, contending they discriminate against conservatives. To these Nazis, discriminating against a conservative is not clicking your heels and doing exactly what they order. Google, YouTube has not been, throughout this pandemic, repositories of truth and scientific inquiry, but have instead acted as enforcers of a narrative, a big tech council of censors in service of the ruling elite. What the hell is he talking about? I always hate it when the rulers complain about the ruling elite, and they mean all of us. YouTube says it took down the DeSantis panel video because some participants said children should not wear masks because they are ineffective at that age and a possible health hazard. YouTube said that contradicts U.S. government guidelines that say children 2 and older should wear masks in public and when around people they don't live with. DeSantis wants the Florida legislature to pass a bill that makes it harder for the companies to remove users they say violate their rules. Critics contend the proposal would have little impact as the companies transcend the state's borders and would be challenged as violating the company's First Amendment rights. Scott Atlas compared YouTube's decision removing the video to the Soviet Union and China, where communist governments banned opinions the rulers disagreed with. I always love it when they say private capitalist business is a bunch of commies. Please. YouTube and its supporters counter that it is a private business and not a government body and is under no obligation to host information it feels violates its rules and standards. The company said yesterday, Monday, it does not discriminate. Our policies apply to everyone and focus on content regardless of the speaker. Criticism of the governor's statements came quickly from Agriculture Commissioner Nikki Fried, a Democrat and potential challenger next year. In a statement, she called his comments unhinged, dangerous rhetoric. DeSantis has long faced criticism from Fried and other Democrats for his handling of the pandemic, saying he allowed the state to be open too quickly. One recent example was spring break, where tens of thousands of college students from around the country and globe crowded into Miami Beach with few masks and no social distancing. But the city did have to impose a curfew to curtail the unruly crowds. Of the American Independent brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Texas GOP Governor Greg Abbott was confronted about why he was suddenly speaking up against alleged sexual abuse in immigrant detention centers, but was silent on the issue during the Trump administration. Abbott last Wednesday called the Freeman Coliseum, an event center in the state which is currently housing around 1,300 unaccompanied immigrant children, a safety and health nightmare, after he says he learned of sexual assault allegations at the facility in San Antonio, Texas. On Friday, Abbott sent a letter to Vice President Kamala Harris requesting the closure of the Freeman facility, citing allegations of sexual assault. Although he attached a memo with 3 anonymous reports of abuses at the facility sent to Texas agencies, those reports did not indicate there had been incidents of sexual assault, but Abbott has persisted in its claims. In an interview on Fox News on Sunday, host Chris Wallace asked Abbott, "Governor, there were thousands of complaints of sexual abuse at migrant shelters during the Trump years. Not to say what's going on now is right, but we couldn't find one instance of you complaining and calling that out when Trump was president." Abbott claimed that this time was different, arguing that the Trump administration, unlike Biden's, was in constant communication with him in his office. Oh, really? You mean you were colluding on the war crimes? The crimes against humanity? You're admitting it? He continued to defend his actions by saying, "I saw reports about exactly what you're talking about, and I saw those reports were filed with federal agencies. The one that I talked about earlier this past week were reports that were filed with state agencies." I know that's not a Texas accent, but, it's Tuesday morning. He continued to defend his actions, saying, "We have a duty to respond to any complaint about sexual abuse of a child in Texas, as well as to investigate it. And that's exactly what I did to make sure it was addressed." But some lawmakers and advocates have been skeptical of Abbott's concern about the sexual abuse allegations. Representative Joaquin Castro and other state lawmakers toured the Freeman Coliseum shelter last Friday. They pushed for evidence to support Abbott's claims. The government doesn't care about these kids. The government wants to send the governor wants to send all these kids back to the dangerous place they came from. So it's not like the governor has a big heart, right? But whatever evidence the governor has, the governor should put forward, Castro said. Democratic Texas State Representative Trey Fisher added, "The children in this facility are not anybody's political piñata. If there are allegations, we take those serious, and Texas Health and Human Services is the first to lead an investigation. But for the governor to play these piñata politics and do little or nothing to support the claim, we have to take that at face value," he said. Jonathan Ryan, who leads the Refugee and Immigrant Center for Education and Legal Services, affectionately known as RACES, added in a statement, "The only reason why Abbott is now acting like he cares about the children in these facilities is for political reasons. What the governor wants is for the Biden administration to stop allowing children to seek home and safety in this country. That is not the solution to the challenge we have in front of us. We must ensure the children are released as soon as possible and be reunited with their families in the U.S." Indeed, Abbott did not speak out about the sexual abuse allegations in detention centers while it was happening under Donald Trump. A 2018 ProPublica report exposed widespread allegations of sexual offenses in immigrant youth shelters. The Texas agency received 859 complaints, the highest number of reports from 2018 to July of 2018 than at any 5-month period from the prior 4 years. Abbott was silent. And then in another 2020 ProPublica report, it found that Immigration and Customs Enforcement guards had a pattern and practice of abuse against and systematically sexually assaulted detained immigrants at a detention facility in El Paso, Texas. And Abbott did not speak out about those allegations either. Staff at the Associated Press bring us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. The Stone Mountain Memorial Association has denied a gathering permit from the Sons of Confederate Veterans who are looking to host their annual Confederate Memorial Day service at Stone Mountain Park outside Atlanta. The gathering was slated for Saturday, but a March 31 letter from Memorial Association CEO Bill Stevens denied the necessary permit. And Stevens listed 3 reasons for the denial, including safety concerns, specifically the pandemic and racial tensions. With the volatile nature of events of the immediate past and ongoing today, there is a clear and present danger to members of the Sons of Confederate Veterans, potential counter-protesters, park employees, and guests might attack them, I suppose. Oh, dear. Stevens also said Silver Dollar City, the group contracted to run the park's attractions, would not allow the group to access the Memorial Plaza lawn. Stone Mountain has been a gathering spot for white supremacists and has century-old ties to the KKK. The park has the largest Confederate monument ever crafted, featuring sculptures of those traitors Robert E. Lee, Jefferson Davis, and Stonewall Jackson carved into the mountainside. The monument has special protection enshrined in Georgia law. Martin O'Toole, a spokesman for the Georgia Division of the Sons of Confederate Veterans, said he understood the concern regarding COVID-19, but questioned the other safety issue. Well, yeah, of course. They're armed, and most counter-protesters are not. All right, let's get to our break. And when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
A fast-growing front in the battle against climate change is focused on developing green technologies aimed at reducing humankind's carbon footprint. But many scientists say simply reducing emissions is no longer enough. We have to find new ways to suck carbon out of the atmosphere. A Maine startup is looking to raise a sinkable carbon-capturing forest in the open ocean. I'm Teresa Carey, and this is Scientific American's 60-Second Science.
In a few weeks, these tanks will be full of little baby oysters the size of a piece of quinoa. But right now, they're still in the larval stage.
Adam Bass strolls through a warehouse on the coast of Harpswell, Maine. Surrounding him are trays of oysters, with water circulating between them in small tubes. In another room stands rows of 8-foot-tall tanks of algae, growing at different stages. The algae will be food for the oysters. If you've never seen a shellfish hatchery, this one looks pretty typical. But it's not. This year, they're planning to harvest something new: atmospheric carbon. His company, called Running Tide Technologies, plans to grow vast quantities of seaweed in drifting ocean mini-farms, farms that the company plans to sink to the bottom of the ocean.
So this is basically taking the emissions of our fossil fuel burning, locking them back up into the structure of the kelp, and sending it back to the bottom of the ocean, where it's at least locked up for hundreds to thousands of years because of the great pressure and the slow movement of the water in the deep ocean.
Kelp, like other plants, uses photosynthesis to extract carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. Colette Feehan, a marine ecologist at Montclair State University, who does not work with Running Tide Technologies, says that kelp is a no-brainer when it comes to carbon sequestration.
The productivity of kelp forests has been found to be comparable to tropical rainforests, meaning that they put on a great deal of biomass, and that biomass is stored carbon. So they're taking carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and storing it in their tissues.
It can do this because it grows fast, about a foot per month. It also quickly sinks to the sea floor. Once there, it degrades very slowly. Trees, on the other hand, store carbon, but ultimately release it back to the atmosphere when they die and decompose. Kelp can stay effectively buried on the seafloor, its carbon entombed by the crushing pressure and lack of oxygen for hundreds, maybe thousands of years.
Certainly as a climate change mitigation strategy, there's mounting evidence that this is a good approach. These forests aren't taking up land that would otherwise be used for agriculture or housing. So there's really no negative side to growing kelp forests.
How it works is that Running Tide Technologies hangs a kelp mini-farm tube from a biodegradable buoy, which they set adrift in the ocean currents. Over several months, the kelp absorbs carbon, growing longer and heavier until it sinks to the bottom, taking the stored carbon with it. They're still experimenting with the buoy's material, trying out glass, cellulose, and other materials. Bask is Running Tide Technologies' head of business development. He says that the project is still in its early stages, with about 1,600 buoys. This year, they're focused on assessing the project's impact, looking for problems like whale entanglement, and evaluating the feasibility with sensors and trackers. In the future, they're aiming for millions of microfarms, sponging up billions of tons of carbon, which they plan to sell in the carbon offset market.
Some of the biggest companies in the world already have net zero commitments, are hungry for permanent, verifiable carbon offsets. And that doesn't mean they have net zero emissions. It means they're offsetting their emissions, while they're also reducing their emissions.
Shopify, an e-commerce company for online stores, will be one of the first companies to buy carbon offsets from Running Tide Technologies.
This can be one of the many solutions we need to employ to have a chance in this fight. We need to mobilize the troops for this war, and if we don't build the infrastructure and the knowledge base to give us a fighting chance, then we might as well give up now.
Running Tide Technologies is drawing from the strong fishing tradition on the Maine coast and casting a net for carbon.
I think very few people on the planet have an appreciation for the scale of our oceans. And, 70% of our planet, it's just such an incomprehensible number, I think, for a lot of people, and the opportunity to kind of put that surface area to work in helping us solve like the biggest challenge facing humanity. I can't think of, a more inspiring or motivating mission.
Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Teresa Carey.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Welcome to A Cup of Health with CDC, a weekly feature of the MMWR, the Morbidity and Mortality Weekly Report. I'm your host, Dr. Kathleen Dooling. From a very young age, we're encouraged to eat fruits and vegetables. Unfortunately, many Americans are not getting the message. Dr. Seung-Hee Lee Kwan is with CDC's National Center for Chronic Disease Prevention and Health Promotion. She's joining us today to discuss the importance of eating enough fruits and vegetables. Welcome to the show, Seung-Hee.
Thank you for having me.
Seung-Hee, what is the recommended amount of fruits and vegetables?
The federal guidelines recommend that adults consume at least 1.5 cups to 2 cups of fruit and 2 to 3 cups of vegetables each day. This is for adults who get less than 30 minutes of physical activity a day. Adults who are more physically active need more calories and thus should be eating more fruits and vegetables. 1 cup is about 12 strawberries or 1 large tomato.
How many people consume the recommended amount of fruits and vegetables?
We found that very few adults are getting enough fruits and vegetables. Just 12% are eating the recommended amount of fruits, and less than 1 in 10 eat enough vegetables. And consumption is lower among men, young adults, and adults living in poverty.
Why is eating a diet rich in fruits and vegetables so important?
Eating a diet rich in fruits and vegetables can help with 3 things. 1, it can reduce the risk of many leading causes of illness and deaths, such as heart disease, type 2 diabetes, some cancers, and even obesity. It can also add important nutrients that are commonly missing in Americans' diet. And it can help with weight management if adults consume fruits and vegetables instead of other calorie-dense foods.
How can we meet the recommended daily intake of fruits and vegetables?
Try to fill half of your plate with fruits or vegetables at each meal or every eating occasion. Making fruits and vegetables the focal point of your meal will help you meet your recommendations. For example, recent studies have shown that adults get most of their fruit during breakfast and snacks. So you can try adding berries to your morning oatmeal or grab a piece of fresh fruit as an afternoon snack. For vegetables, most adults eat them at dinner, so try adding more into your lunch by adding a side salad or packing a snack of baby carrots or grape tomatoes.
Are canned or frozen products just as good as fresh?
all forms of fruits and vegetables count towards meeting the recommendations. For the most health benefits, make sure that the fruits and vegetables you consume have a limited amount of salt, butter, sugar, or creamy sauces. When selecting canned fruits, choose the ones with lowest sugars. And for canned or frozen vegetables, choose those lower in sodium.
Where can listeners get more information about eating a healthy diet?
Listeners can go to cdc.gov/nutrition or choosemyplate.gov.
Thanks, Seung-hee. I've been talking today with Seung-hee Lee Kwon about the importance of eating a healthy diet. Eating a diet rich in fruits and vegetables can help reduce the risk of many leading causes of illness and death and add important nutrients to your diet. Make sure you're eating enough. Until next time, be well. This is Dr. Kathleen Dooling for A Cup of Health with CDC.
For the most accurate health information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
Hi, it's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. It doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage. Because you are our biggest donor. netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
It's time for America to go back to the future of true greatness created by people united to build a strong nation for the common good. From the start of our United States, Americans have backed leaders who dared to do big public projects. Jefferson, Lincoln, TR, FDR, Truman, Ike, JFK, and LBJ all dared to achieve bold goals. It's only since Ronald Reagan's government is evil demagoguery that our presidents and lawmakers shrivel to no-can-do mediocrities, unwilling even to try tackling America's big needs or invest in our people's unlimited possibilities. Their failure is why our nation's infrastructure, once world-class, has deteriorated to an embarrassing 16th in the world. It's hard to muster any national pride in chanting, "We're number 16." But surprise, here comes Joe, a lifelong go-slow Democrat, unexpectedly proposing a get-serious, roll-up-our-sleeves $2 trillion package of investments to modernize and extend America's collapsing infrastructure. In addition to roads, bridges, and dams, it gives a long-overdue boost to such needs as rural high-speed broadband and providing affordable child care facilities, all geared to creating good union jobs and lifting local economies. Even more transformative is Biden's Back to the Future method of paying for this Rebuild America agenda by returning to progressive taxation. Instead of the same old no-tax, laissez-faire extremism that Washington has practiced for 40 years, Biden will at long last demand that multinational corporate behemoths stop dodging their tax obligations to America. It's the same fair tax policy that funded our nation's real needs in the past, while also increasing productivity and raising living standards for millions of working families. This is Jim Hightower saying, let's do it again. The Hightower Radio Lowdown is brought to you by our new Lowdown Happy Hour, now live streaming on Facebook from the Chat and Chew Cafe. With kick-ass political spark plugs like Beto O'Rourke, musical champions like Marcia Ball, and grassroots change makers like the New Georgia Project and People's Action. The Lowdown Happy Hour is reaching out to you to help put the move in movement. So grab a libation and join the fun. Details at hightowerlowdown.org.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1873. That was the day the single most deadly incident of the Reconstruction era occurred, known as the Colfax Massacre. As many as 150 black Republicans in Colfax, Louisiana, were slaughtered by white supremacists determined to destroy advances made by the formerly enslaved. Results of the 1872 gubernatorial election in Louisiana had been hotly contested. President Ulysses S. Grant ordered federal troops in to support the Republican winner, William Pitt Kellogg. A number of black radical Republicans had also won or retained local and state political positions. William Ward, a black Civil War veteran and militia leader, had won a seat in the state legislature. By the beginning of April, he and others were being threatened with attacks on the Grant Parish Courthouse in Colfax and lynchings by defeated white Southern Democrats. Desperate for backup, Ward and others left for New Orleans to appeal for federal reinforcement. On the holy Easter Sunday, ex-Confederates, Klansmen, and Democrats rode into Colfax armed with guns, rifles, knives, and a cannon. 150 black Republicans were ready to defend their courthouse. Fighting raged on for hours, but eventually black Republicans were forced to retreat and then were massacred. 97 whites were indicted on federal conspiracy charges under the 1870 Enforcement Act, designed to enforce civil rights and root out Klan terror. The case went all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court and resulted in the ruling United States versus Cruikshank, which essentially gutted the Enforcement Act. Of the 97 indicted, 9 were tried and 3 were initially found guilty. The Cruikshank ruling eventually overturned their convictions and effectively marked the legal end of Reconstruction. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River, in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 35 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting only a high of about 63 degrees today, considerably cooler than yesterday, though as the fates may have it, we could be a tad warmer than that, but we will see. Winds will be a bit stiffer than usual and coming out of the north at 10 to 15 miles per hour, mostly sunshiny with a few afternoon clouds. And then some clouds this evening will give way to mainly clear skies overnight, lows in the mid-30s with winds out of the north at 10 to 15 miles per hour. Sunny tomorrow with highs in the mid-60s, and winds will be out of the north at 5 to 10. Confirmed cases of coronavirus in Jackson County in the southern part of Oregon have now increased even more dramatically, now to 9,657, with deceased standing at 126 confirmed. Pollen is rated as none right outside the window here in Rogue River proper. The air quality index for the region is good at 32 parts per million, and that daytime UV index has dropped from high down to moderate, only one notch though, from 6 to 5. Barometric pressure is rising at 30.04 inches. Visibility is up to 10 miles, and relative humidity is at 72%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world, and we call that the Weather Underground. London is 53 and sunny. Paris is 53 and sunny. Rome is 58 and mostly cloudy. Kyiv is 50 degrees with a light drizzle. Kabul is 62 and partly cloudy. Hong Kong is 72 and clear. Tokyo is 63 and cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 60 and clear. San Francisco, California is 48 degrees and partly cloudy. And New York is 54 degrees Fahrenheit and cloudy. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. David Lundgren of Reuters brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Foreign spying and interference in Canada last year hit levels not seen since the Cold War, in part because of vulnerabilities caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. The Canadian Security Intelligence Service, affectionately known there as the CSIS, singled out Russia and China as particular causes for concern and said key national security threats such as violent extremism, foreign interference, espionage, and malicious cyber activity grew in 2020 and in many ways, quote, became much more serious for Canadians, end quote. In its annual report for last year, the CSIS linked the jump in foreign spying to the increasing number of people working from home because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Foreign threat actors, including hostile intelligence services and those working on their behalf, have sought to exploit the social and economic conditions created by the pandemic to gather valuable information, it said. The report was the latest from Canada's intelligence community to focus on Russia and China. The head of CSIS said in February that China posed a serious strategic threat, while the Signals Intelligence Agency last November identified state-sponsored programs in China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea as cybercrime threats for the first time. China, Russia, and other foreign states continued to covertly gather political, economic, and military information in Canada through targeted threats, activities in support of their own state development goals.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière, la promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Nicole Winfield of the Associated Press brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. A Rome judge ordered the arrest of an Italian businessman living in London who is a prime suspect in the Vatican's 2-year investigation into the Holy See's $416 million investment in a London real estate venture. Judge Corrado Cappiello said there was an absolute concrete risk that Gianluigi Torzi could commit crimes if he is not taken into custody, saying the evidence showed he engaged in a true economic strategy aimed at defrauding tax authorities. Torzi's lawyers immediately filed a motion to contest the order before it passes on to Interpol and British police. They noted in a statement that a British judge recently dismantled much of the Vatican's case against Torzi in a related asset seizure ruling. Vatican prosecutors have accused Torzi of extorting the Holy See of $17.8 million U.S. to turn over ownership of a luxury London building in which the Vatican's Secretariat of State was a major shareholder. Neither he nor anyone else under investigation has been indicted. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day. But you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we'll meet up tomorrow for Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Fancy that. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks, and we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleurs sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. De novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.